Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible to all of you and you're able to see me. Just give me 1 minute. I'm getting the chat set up so that I can monitor what you guys are putting into the chat as well. In the meantime, let me give you an update. Today's session is going to be about data analytics using Power BI. Okay, so yeah, I'm just checking it. Yeah, so can someone please confirm if you're able to hear me and I'm clearly audible to all of you and you're able to see the screen or you're able to see me? I'm sorry. Hello, Tejaswar. Okay, good. You're able to hear me, right? Am I loud and clear? Am I loud and clear to all of you? Right? Yeah. Okay. Good. Great. Okay. Sorry, just a little bit of time to get the initial adjustment and everything done because I don't want to have a problem in between the 2 hours. We need to go at a non-stop pace where we need to understand a lot of concepts and then we need to apply them with our real life data. So I'm going to present my screen once again. Okay, before that, let me just create a copy of the file so that I don't waste time on that with you people being on the screen. So by the time I'm getting things set up, just to give you an update, today's session is going to be about how we can do the same case study, the same printer sales case study, and how do we actually go about with it in Power BI. So when we actually work with Power BI, we are working with data which is more at a granular data set. We've recently completed a good 4 hours Power BI workshop where I have directly taught you how to work with the data, importing everything right from scratch. So today's session is going to be more of an extension to it. But in the last session, we did not talk about how to work with the data set where you know we had multiple tables of data. But today we're going to be doing that. So I want all of you to please focus through the session, and if there are any queries, please put it up on the chat. So we have people joining in from different places of India. At the outset, I would like to welcome all of you back to today's session, and again thank the entire Let's Upgrade team, the backend team, especially Anam and her team, who has been really very important for they're the back end. They're like the backbone of this entire setup where we are actually training. So it's great fun to obviously be interacting with all of you and working with all of you through and through. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start off the session right now. I'm just copying this. Okay, so I'm actually creating a copy of the data set because it's the same data that we'll be using. And I will take you through the entire data set once again, just in case, things are not very clear from yesterday's session in terms of what data we are using. Okay, so I think the data set is clearly visible to all of, I mean, the screen is visible to all of you. Now I'm pulling up the data set, which is the printer sales data, which we've been working with yesterday. So again, we've got these 4 sheets. Now out of these 4 sheets, 3 of these sheets are already put into a table format. And because it's in a table format, it becomes much more easier to work with the data. Now, this task sheet is not really something that we'll be working on, but it's just a guideline to actually work with the data and start creating something out of this particular data set. So now let's start off with the introduction of or pulling of this data into Power BI. So first things first, I'm going to open up Power BI. I will just close this file, and then I will fire up Power BI. And once I open up Power BI, there are a few settings that I need to make, which I'm going to discuss. Because when you open up Power BI, if you are new to Power BI, if you've never used it, there are a few settings you better do before you actually jump into working with data. Now, in order to make changes to the settings, when you open up Power BI, before you even start opening up and working with a blank report, which is ideally something that you would do, you start off by going to the options and settings section. And then again, you click on options. Now, once you click on options here, you need to go to the part where you've got the global settings and the current file settings. Now, please note that when you're working with global settings, these global settings are for the entire Power BI file. I mean, the entire Power BI software. So that means that if you have any files that you open up, which is apart from this file, it will apply to the entire set of Power BI files you're working with. So these are the global settings, and these are the current file settings. Now, please note that these current file settings are basically designed only specific to the current file. They're not for all the files. So these are for all files, and these are for current file, this particular file. Now, when I say particular file, it means that you have to make this setting, or you have to make these settings only once for the file, not every time you open it up. But in terms of the global settings, you make it once, and it applies to all the files that you open up. Okay. So first things first, I'll just show you what settings you need to make and you need to update before you start working with Power BI, or you need to check rather, because if you've already been part of the Power BI bootcamp, you would know exactly what has happened. So to begin with, I will start off with the security settings, and in the security settings, I'll just run through the settings that you need to have activated before you start working with Power BI. The first thing is you need to look at the ArcGIS for Power BI, which needs to be activated. So you click on this Use ArcGIS for Power BI. The next thing that you need to do is you need to go ahead and during the session, if at any point in time my screen freezes or there's a problem, please do give me an update in the chat. It would really be helpful. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to work with the map and field map visuals. So with respect to the map and field map visuals, I will be looking at the I will be activating this, because if I do not activate this, I will not be able to directly create any kind of map visuals. This is what we need from the security perspective. And then we move to the preview features. Now, within the preview features, you can activate all of them if you want, but I particularly want to activate this on object interaction, because this is where I give Power BI the entire right to, okay, go ahead and create update the visuals as per the fields you're entering. Okay, so this is a very, very important thing that we need to be dealing with. Now, moving ahead, let's talk about the current file settings. Now, remember, once you've made the global file settings or global settings, this is done. You can click on OK, but if you click OK, you need to restart your entire Power BI to ensure that these settings get updated. If you do not do that, you will not be able to get the updated settings for you in the Power BI software. Now, current file settings, the setting that I'm going to show you right now is the data load settings. Now, please be under the, remember that this data load setting that you have is basically for only the current file. And I'm doing this setting because I'm using a multi-source data set, or basically a multi-table data set that I'm working with. So in this case, I will be working with three different, so there's the printer sales data set that is there. Okay, and this is like a dummy data set. So in this, I've got three tables. I've got the invoices table, I've got the customers table, and I've got the products table, right? So these three tables need to be imported into Power BI. Now, once I import these three tables into Power BI, if you remember in yesterday's session, I wrote multiple lookup functions, okay? At least 4 to pull in data from the customers table and the products table into the invoices table. And I'm not going to be doing anything of that sort in this data set or in this particular case study, because I'm going to be using something called as the data model and relationships in data models, right? So if you really want to actually understand what data modeling is and the relationship concepts, I would recommend that you go to the data load section and then please switch off these two options under the relationships area. Okay, so switch off the import relationships from data sources on first load and auto detect new relationships after data is loaded. The reason why I'm asking you to do this is because I'm going to teach you how to create the relationships in the data model from scratch. So how would you do that? So first and foremost, we are going to switch this off. And once we've switched this off, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on OK so that I get the settings applied, whatever settings I want to apply. Now, once you've finished applying the settings, okay, you need to go ahead and import your data. So basically, I have already mentioned this in my bootcamp, but I'm going to explain you and I'm going to take you through the entire process of what we are going to be doing today right from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get data into Power BI. Now, when I say getting data into Power BI, it basically means connecting to the data sources that I want to work with in this particular Power BI file. The next thing that I'm going to do, once I pull the data from the data sources into Power BI, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to perform the ETL process, which is called as extract, transform, and load. Okay. Now, within this entire process, I'm going to transform the entire data. So when I use the word transform, it basically means clean up the data. So transform the data, and then I'm going to load the data. Once I've completed the transformation and the loading of the data, the next thing I'm going to do is, because after I've cleaned up the data and everything, I've reviewed the data, everything seems to be good, I've applied the right data, data types, etc. So within transformation, what do I actually do? I perform a few important tasks, like maybe I would need to unpivot the data if the data is already in a consolidated form, or maybe in a form which is more or less already aggregated. Then maybe I will need to clean up the data in terms of trimming the data, etc., or splitting the data, etc. Then I will need to apply the right data types. This is a very, very important step that I need to do, because every column will have some kind of data within it, and I need to apply the right data type to every column so that when I actually start the analysis, I'm not struggling with the correct analysis with the wrong data type. Because a lot of times what happens, I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say I have a column which contains time, or maybe I have a column that contains date. Now, a lot of times what people do is they unknowingly leave the date and time format as a text format. Now, this is something which is not very, very clear for a lot of people. So if you leave this as a text format, what happens is when you actually start working with time intelligence calculations, where you're actually trying to find out maybe year to date calculation or something of that sort, you are going to be in a big soup. So when I say you're going to be in a big soup, it basically means you're going to be in a big trouble. The reason is because you won't be able to perform any kind of time-based calculations. So what you need to do is you need to know how to perform those time-based calculations, because that is going to be dependent on your time and date values, right? So ensure that you have the right approach when you're actually dealing with the data sets. Okay, after the transformation and loading of the data, so this is where you are basically from Power BI, you are actually into Power Query. This is where you are into Power Query. Now, after you've loaded the data, you get back into Power BI and then you start modeling the data. So this is where you model the data, and this is where you understand a few very important concepts. The first thing that you may do is you would try to connect, or you would try to create a visual that involves data coming in from two different tables or maybe three different tables. Now, when that thing happens, you are going to have a problem. The problem will be that when I, like, say, for example, I try to create a sales report or maybe a sales visual that tells me what is the total sales by different states, or maybe the quantity sold by different states. Now, the problem is the state column doesn't reside in the main sales table. Okay. It resides in a different table altogether. Now, because that happens, you need to either pull the data from that customers table into the sales table and then create the visual, or else the other approach would be to create relationships. So this is where I'm going to teach you today. I'm going to teach you how to work with relationships in data. Now, this is a very, very important concept because you need to understand how this works. I have already spoken about data category and data properties when I talked about the boot camp in Power BI. Then I will teach you how to work with the next thing, that is creating hierarchies in our data. Hierarchies is a very, very important thing because this allows you to drill into your data and drill up into the data. This is a very important thing. Then I'm also going to talk about how to work with calculations. Now, this is going to be a very, very important topic because this is where I'm going to introduce you to a very important concept called as DAX. Now, DAX is basically an engine that is going to be the backbone or the structure for the entire formulation concepts in Power BI. Whenever you try to create a calculation in Power BI, you are going to encounter DAX. And DAX is going to be a very, very important concept throughout the entire journey of Power BI. If you are planning to take the journey of Power BI and you say, I want to skip DAX, it's not happening. The reason it's not happening is because DAX forms the backbone of the entire core calculation structure within Power BI. A lot of people don't know this. And DAX has been there for quite some time. And when you work with an Excel, when you create your calculations, you create your columns, etc., you are working with the Excel engine. But in the newer versions of Excel, when Excel had the Power Pivot introduced, that's when DAX was the backbone, or you can say the core structure of working with in Power Pivot. Okay, I'm not going to get into that area much. Then after we've completed the modeling of the data, the next part is going to be to visualize the data. And after we visualize the data, we are going to go ahead and get some insights from the data, and we're going to go ahead and analyze the data. So this is going to be the fun part where I'm going to teach you how to go ahead and analyze and visualize the data. I can either use an S or Z. I'm just staying standard S across the board. So that's going to be like the end of our entire workshop for today. Let me tell you, 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours is relatively a very small span of time to learn Power BI. This is one data set that I'm assuming is like one of the most important data sets when you want to get into and become a data analyst. So if you're really looking to become an analyst, spend time with this tool. Okay, just like you would spend time with Instagram, Twitter, and stuff. Spend time with the tool. Let me tell you, this is something maybe a little off the track, but I think we need to spend a little bit more time with the tools and show more love to the tools. Try to understand it and build a bond with the tools. The reason is because these tools will help you in your journey in whatever area you're planning to work with, like whether you're planning to work with into the data analysis section or the analytics part or maybe the data scientist part. Everywhere this is going to hold a very, very important position, right? So if you're planning to start learning Python, R, Power BI, Tableau, Excel, SQL, whatever be the tool you're trying to engage with and try to learn, please ensure you give time to it. Give at least about a half an hour a day for every tool that you can work with, or at least you're learning to work with, right? As simple as Excel. I have spent 14 years, 15 years into the training industry. But despite that, I make sure that I learn at least one new trick on a daily basis when I'm working with Excel, even for that matter, when I'm scrolling through my Reels or Instagram stuff and all that. So please ensure you show love to the tool. It is going to love you back, right? So let's begin our journey with today's session. And here I'm going to start off by connecting to the data source. So just let me get my charger here. Okay. So the data source is basically an Excel file. So I need to use the home tab, and then here you can see that we've got the different data sources that you can connect to. You can choose to connect to an entire plethora of sources by clicking on the Get Data button. And when you do click on the Get Data button, you get access to the entire plethora of sources of data that you can connect to. right from the file, databases, Microsoft Fabric, Power Platform, Azure Online Services, and some other options available. Let's keep it simple. Let's connect to an Excel source that is one of the most widely used sources that we normally do encounter. Let me tell you, even organizations, okay, a lot of people say we need to learn how to connect to SQL. Yes, learning how to connect to SQL and other sources is a great deal. Yes, no doubt about that. But a lot of people in a lot of these organizations do not give you access to the SQL server. So if you really want to build some reports, you will have to go to your or through the SAP or whatever ERP tool you're using and pull the data directly from there. Because a lot of times when you have access to the entire database or to the entire server, it could spell disastrous for the organization. So there are two methods they handle it. One is they either create views for you and then they push the data for you. And second is they do give you access to the ERP or whatever SAP you're working with and directly connecting to it. Anyways, let's connect to the Excel workbook and let's click on connect. Now, the moment you click on connect, you will see the option where you will have access to the open data source window, right? Now here I can connect to the data source which I want to work with. So I have my folder opened. Let's just pick this up. I think, okay. So I'm going to connect to this and let's just look at the data that we have available, right? So whenever you are connecting, it's always better, like whenever you are attending a workshop or something, and when some data is shared with you, always maintain the original copy with you because you never know when you may require to work with it, right? Now the question here you can see is you've got 4 sheets of data. Now this is where things change. So here, when you see this gray icon, you basically look at these gray icons, and these are sheets that you're working with. Whereas these icons that you see here, they are blue icons with the blue header icons. These are your tables. So when you're working with tables, you have a different approach. When you're working with sheets, you have a different approach. So whenever you're working with sheets, your data is in a range format. And when you're working with data, which is with that blue icon, you're working with a table format. Now, I'm not going to get into the differentiation between the table and range format in depth, but I will give you a complete understanding of why you need to work with the table format rather than working with the range format. First and foremost, the data will automatically update when you work with the table format rather than working with the range format. So it's always better if you're working with a lot of Excel data, preferably go open up your Excel file, convert it to a table format, and then pull it into Power BI. If you do not do that, that's also absolutely fine. But with the table format, it gives you an edge over the data updating for you. Now let's move into the next part where I select the data sources that I want to work with. I will select customers and just have a quick preview so that I don't end up with the wrong data set. So you can see here, you get a quick preview of the data, which gives you the different rows and the columns that you're working with. Remember, the number of rows will be truncated for your preview, but the number of columns or the fields or your variables that you see will be clearly visible to you. Now, in this case, what we do is we also look at the invoices table. And here you can see this is the entire data for the invoices table. And within the invoices table, again, you have a truncated view for the data. So that's not a very big problem. You will be able to see the entire data when we actually move into Power BI and Power Query as well. Now, the next thing I look at is the products table. Now, in the products table, here you can again see we've got some good number of columns and rows. So I'm going to select the check boxes for all 3 of them. That means I am now ready to bring the data into Power BI. I've used the word bring the data or get the data into Power BI. I'm not saying load the data, because before you load the data, let me tell you this very, very interesting thing. Okay, even if you know your data is very, very clean without any problems, please ensure that you do not directly load your data. Loading your data without the proper transformations or without the correct checks in place will result in incorrect dashboards and reports for you. And I'm sure you're not in any mood of getting incorrect reports and stuff. So please ensure that you do not click on load directly. You do click on transform data before you start working. Okay, so let's just click on transform data and let's head into Power Query editor before we start working with the data and creating our good looking reports and dashboards. Okay, now you will see that when I load my data into when I get the data into Power Query, you may see this kind of bars and stuff that you see. Don't worry, these columns and bars, they are basically just preview tools. So first and foremost, I'll go to the view tab before I do anything, and I will switch off the three preview tools, that is column distribution, column profile, and column quality. Once you've done this, you go back to the home tab and then you look out for each of these tables one by one. So we'll start off with the customers table. Now, when you look at the customers table, you have just 4 columns here. I've not taken a very large data set just to avoid any kind of confusion and any sort of intimidation when you look at very large amounts of data. So here you can see you've got the account column, you've got a customer name column, a state column, and a type column. Now, before we do anything, we can go to the view tab and we can look at the column quality to ensure whether everything is valid and there is no error in the data. Okay. Okay, so I think Indian register the okay, my name is Krishna Javade. Krishna, I don't know how this is to be done, but yes, I think registration of the attendance is going to be directly on the link, that there's an all-in-one link that you can actually work with. So please check that on all-in-one link. That's where you're going to be having all your registration and the attendance part. So the backend team can help you if you are facing any technical issues. So I think you can connect with the backend team for that. Okay. So if there are any questions pertaining to what we've discussed so far, please put them in the chat and then I can keep explaining things for you. So this is the first tool that we see, that's the column quality. Now let me tell you why Power BI. Power BI gives you the ability to look at data and confirm whether everything's okay even before you start your analysis. Not like Excel where you've started the analysis, you've built your you've built your pivot table, and then you realize, oh gosh, there's so much of blank data, there's so much of erroneous data in the column is not correct, and so on and so forth. So this is where you need to learn how to use these interesting data preview tools. So first is the column quality. Second is the column distribution. So when you click on distribution, you can see there's a very interesting part that says the number of distinct and number of unique values. Now, this is going to be an interesting thing. Remember, whenever you deal with any multi-table data set where you will be using data across tables, you need to be very clear about the concepts of primary key and foreign key. Now, these are concepts that I'm borrowing from the database terminology. Now, obviously, as an analyst, it's always good for you to learn databases as well. So you can learn SQL, Oracle, and stuff, or other databases. But I think SQL is a great place to start off to learn your databases from. Now, let's go ahead and understand how do we deal with this particular setup, right? So here, to begin with, I will start off with the column where you can see you've got 19 distinct and 19 unique values, right? Now, these 19 distinct and unique, what do they actually mean? So first and foremost, when we say distinct, like for example, here you can see there are 2 types of customers, automotive customers and financial customers. Distinct basically means if I look at the entire column and I remove all the duplicates from it, the number of values that remain after that is equal to the distinct values, right? And unique, on the other hand, basically means unique value, something which is not repeated. So there are 0 unique here, but on this case, account number. So every customer in the customers table has a different unique account number, and so is the name as well. Now you can use, like I've shown you this yesterday as well in Excel. I used the VLOOKUP function to extract data from the customers table and I put it into the invoices table. Now, how does that actually work for us? So it works in a very simple manner. It works this way, that we have got a situation where we are trying to get information from one table into another table. And when that requires to be done, we have to have something called as a common key or a common column. And that column is the account column or the customer name column in the customer's case. Now the question is, which of these would I take up? So remember, always take up the first column. Okay, one, this could be one of the things. Second thing is that it should be a numeric or an alphanumeric code. So always try to take up a column which is a code for you. For example, maybe a roll number, a registration number, or maybe for that matter, account number or whatever, blah, blah, blah. This is where we actually talk about using the account column. Okay, so we take the account column and we move about with it. Now remember that the account column will become your primary key, because this is where customers is my master table. So I'm going to talk about something called as the star schema also very soon, and how it actually is used in our data modeling concept. This is a very, very important data modeling concept that you need to understand. Okay. Anyways, now we move on to the next preview tool that is called as column profile. So when I actually look at the state column and I click on column profile, what I do get to know is I get to know and I get to get a preview that how many states are we actually catering to, like which are the states the company is operating in. So there are 6 different states of the United States of America that the company is operating in. One is Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, North Carolina, Alabama, and South Carolina. Apart from this, we have got also, when you hover your cursor on this, you get to see we've got 9 different transactions, 9 different customers belonging to Georgia, which is constituting to about 47% of the overall customer base comes from Georgia. And the lowest is Carolina, that is just 1, which is accounting to about 5% of the customer base, right? So this is what you get to see before you move ahead. So I'll just switch off these 3 things and I will move to the next table. Okay, before I move to the next table, let me complete the transformations required for this table. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to update this customers to, I'm going to update the table name to customers, only customers. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the column. So we've got account, which is 1, 2, 3. So I can change it to string if I want. That's a text. Because remember, your primary keys are not going to be used for calculation. So even if they're numeric, we're not really going to be using them. The choice is yours. You can either change it to text over here, or you can hide it completely from the report view, because this is something we don't really need to work with. Then we've got the customer name, then the state column, and then the type column. Now, all of these are in a text format, which is absolutely cool with us. We don't need to do anything with this. The next thing we do is we go to the invoices table. Now, in the invoices table, I've got document type, document number, the date. It's very important for you to please check out what is the date also. It should be in a proper appropriate date format. So please check that out. Then we've got the customer account number. That's absolutely fine. We've got the name. We also have got the item code, or basically the item number for each of the products that we are selling. So in this case, we've got the document number like 22801. Now 22801 is for 106, that is JS Automotive. And within this account, within this invoice, we have 2 different products that have been sold. Now let's understand what are the 2 products. So you can see the 2 products sold over here are item 1 and item 2. That is part numbers 5101 and 5110. So let's see how do we go about with this, right? So we move to the right, and then we can get the description. So JS Automotive has ordered a paper rim, maybe that is for dot matrix printing, and the printer ribbon dot matrix premium product. Okay, so the quantity is ordered and we've got the unit price. Now I want you to pay attention here and let me know in this data. So this is my invoices table. Now remember, this is the table where all the transactions of the company are being recorded. That means whatever is being purchased, whoever purchases it, what is the product being purchased, everything for that matter is being updated in this particular table. Hence, this table is called as a transactional table, or a transactions table, or a transaction table, whatever you want to call it. On the other hand, the customers table stores the customer master data. Hence, the customers table and the products table, both of them are referred to as the master tables. Now, why are they called the master tables? They're called the master tables because they hold information about the entities that are going to be used in the business. For example, customers. So customers buy products, and that is what is the activity that is resulting into a transaction. Whenever a product is bought by the customer, or whenever the customer buys a product, it is going to result into a transaction, and that is an event in the business, and those events are stored in the transaction table. I think that's a little too much to process for you right now, but to cut it short, to give it a very clear explanation, whenever you buy a product, or whenever the customer buys a product and the product is bought by the customer, it results in an event, which is a transaction that is stored and maintained in this invoices table. Now, you can call this invoices table a transaction table, or there's another very interesting thing that happens. Okay, in the Power BI terminology, you call your master tables as dimension tables, whereas you call the transaction tables as fact tables. So all your masters are called as dimension tables, whereas your transaction tables are called as fact tables. Okay, now what is the use of having the master table and the dimension table? So basically, when we have to create a report, let's say I've got sales data maintained here. Okay, just an example. I have a column for sales, and I have, let's say, customer ID, I've got the customer name, and how much has the person purchased. In the other table, I've got the customer ID, I've got the customer name, and I've got the customer region. Now, when I want to find out sales by region, so for example, I want to find out, let's say I'm operating a business in 3 different cities, let's say Mumbai, Ahmedabad, and Lucknow. Now, in these 3 cities, I want to see what is the total sales there. So for that to happen, I have to create a link between these 2 tables. And that link that I create in Excel, what I normally do is I just bring this into this table and flatten out the data. Flatten out the data meaning I increase the size of my table. But that's not what I'm going to do in Power BI. In Power BI, I'm going to create a relationship. Okay. Now this relationship that is going to be created is going to act as the lookup, or basically is going to help me to pull the data from the customers table into the fact table, or the transactions, or you can say the invoices table, right? So this side, the primary key is your customer ID, and on this side, the foreign key is also your customer ID. But remember, the foreign key resides in the fact table, whereas the primary key resides in the dimension table, right? Now comes the interesting part, where I am going to be showing you how, after loading the data, we are going to create all these things and work with it, right? Okay, so in the invoices table, the first thing I do is I rename the table. So I can go to the invoices query name here and just remove the prefix of 1. So we have customers and we have invoices. I could rename this to sales as well if I need to. That's entirely your choice and your prerogative. Now what we do is we look out for the data that's there. So I've got document type, document number, customer account number, then the customer name, the item, the reason code. Now you may see that there's a lot of null data here. Okay, so if I actually do a quick profiling and quality and distribution of this data, you would notice that here we've got about 97 empty values. Now this is a very important point that you do not miss out. Okay, You do have got the reason code mentioned here. That's great. But the important part is you would be looking at this number, which is how much is data, how much of the data in this column is valid and how much of this data is empty. And you would be, like prompted, or you would be encouraged, or you would be tempted to sort of delete this column from the analysis. Do not do that. Do not do that. The reason is because this is a column which will be used for analyzing the return data in your business. A lot of times you just eliminate the columns from the analysis based on the quantifiable number of empty values or empty records. Please do not do that. Remember that you have to first understand whether the column is of use to me or no. There's a very simple reason why you have only 3% entries in this column. The reason why you have only 3% entries in this column is because there are primarily invoice data maintained here, but there may be a few returns that would have happened in this entire transactions database, which has been recorded in this column. So let the column be there, because this is where we will be using it for calculating how to get the return percentage of the entire analysis. Like how much of the data is returned out of the entire transactions, how much data is returned, how many transactions are return transactions, what is the value of the return transactions. That is also something that we need to find out. So all those things need to be maintained here, and how much are we actually spending on managing these return documents, right? So anyways, we are going to keep this, and we're going to retain the column. So I'm going to switch off these three, and then I look at part number, which is again a very important column. The reason part number column is going to be used is because it's going to be helping us in dealing with the connection to the products table. Okay, I can see a few questions about, can we put this in CV? Okay, let me tell you one thing very important for all of you. See, putting all these things in your CV is great. You can do that, but remember, when you actually go in for the proper actual interview, you will be asked to create this also, and you may also be asked to ask questions about this. So if you are in a position to answer questions regarding it, you are most welcome to put it in your CV. But I recommend that you put it as part of your CV only after you have practiced whatever has been taught in this particular session. So even if you're not, following along with me, you go through the session as a live session right now, put across your queries, understand what's happening. After you finish today's session, this recording will be available on our Let's Upgrade YouTube channel. You can just pick it up from there, go through it, and utilize it. It's your choice. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. But make sure that you practice it, so that when you actually go in for the interview, you know what questions are being asked about it. Okay, you could have multiple questions regarding what is a transaction table, what is a fact table, etc. Blah blah blah. Right. So please ensure that you are working with it. When sir using Power BI, no, I can't understand, or what is your query? Okay, great. So I think I can now proceed. So we are using the part number, then the description, then the quantity, and the unit price. Now, before I move ahead, you can see unit price is a column which is actually something to do with the currency, or basically something to do with the purchase value of a product. Now, when you're saying purchase value, or maybe the sale value of a product, it's important that you understand that when you're talking about purchase or sale, it is something to do with a currency. So whenever you have something to do with the currency, you need to update the data type to a fixed decimal number. Remember this. So I'm going to go ahead, click on this button here, and change it to a fixed decimal number. When I do that, it'll ask you, do you want to replace the current step, or do you want to add a new step? Now, I always prefer to add a new step. The reason is because there's already a step called as changed type when I've imported the data. Okay, when you import the data, there's always a step that is there wherein Power BI automatically detects the data type for you, because there's a setting that you do for having the appropriate data type enabled for you, okay, or detected for you. Now this is for the entire set of columns in this table. So if I replace this, it means that I am challenging whatever Power BI has uh, given. There's no harm in that. There's absolutely no harm in that. But the problem is, if at some point in time I believe that, okay, no, this step that I've updated shouldn't have been this, it should have been something else, that's when the problem occurs. If you try to delete this step and you try to reapply it, you will have to do it for all the columns again. So that's the reason I prefer using the add new step option. So here I click on add new step, and once I do that, you can see there's a change type one step added to my applied step section, right? So here, what do? We go ahead and we have the quantity and we have the unit price available. Now I have a question for all of you. Do we have any KPI that we can directly use for analysis? Now, you would be wondering, why am I asking you this question right now? I'm asking you this question right now is because I do not want to go into the data. I do not want to go into Power BI and experience a situation where I realize, oh, I think we don't have enough KPIs to start our analysis. Because if that happens, you will have to start from scratch. So you can see you've got a quantity and unit price column available. And basis these two columns, we can utilize these two columns right now and create a column called as the revenue column. Is that right, everyone? Math and physics TV, I will talk about this when I complete it. So basically, you can put this into a PowerPoint presentation. I'll discuss this later on, okay? But my question to all of you is, I can create a revenue column out of this, and that is the starting point of my KPI creation. So very quickly, what is the full form of KPI? What is the full form of KPI, everyone? All those who are attending the session, what is the full form of KPI? So basically, KPI stands for key performance indicator, okay? And key performance indicator, very good. Key performance indicator, not information. Afza, the answer is indicator. Yes, that's right, Shaheen M, that's the answer. Key performance indicator is what we are actually looking at. So remember, key performance indicator basically is nothing but your KPI, or you can say the metric. You can also call this as the business metric. Now, these business metrics basically help you to measure the performance of your business, like how much revenue have we done, which state has given us the maximum revenue, and so on and so forth. So, uh, key performance indicator, math, physics, TV. I don't know what that question mark indicates. I'm not really sure what you're trying to ask. If you could be a little bit more clear in the chat, it would really help. Okay, so when we talk about key performance indicators, we need to have one column called as the revenue column. So what I could do is I could create a column in this by using something called as the add column. So if you remember, I talked about something called as calculations in modeling the data. Now this is where we are going to discuss something called as the calculations that we deal with. Now, it's important for us to understand that calculations in Power BI, or calculations related to a Power BI analysis, can be done in two main places. Okay. One is you can do it within the source data itself. Now, when I say within the source data, it means you open up your Excel file or you open up your Power BI file. I mean, sorry, your SQL database, and that's where you perform your calculations. So it's always something which is a point of contention as to whether you should create your calculation in the source or not. For me, as per my understanding, I always feel that creating the calculations in the source is a strict no-no. Why? I'll explain it to you. Let's say I am importing data for 2024 data, okay? And maybe I have 2025 data coming in, and or let's say I'm taking up I have 2023 data, and now since the year 2024 has already finished, I want to import the 2024 data into Power BI. Now, if I have already created a set of calculations in 2023 data, I will have to open up 2024 again and perform exactly the same calculations in Power BI. Now, remember, the frequency of importing of data depends or plays a very important role in this situation. If I'm doing this on a yearly basis, like I sit after 12 months and do this, it's okay. But if I'm doing this on a daily basis, or maybe 3 to 4 times in a day, that would be really stupid of me to do it. Because when I already have the ability to handle calculations very easily in Power BI itself, why on earth would I opt for this particular option? So that is where you should avoid creating your calculations in the source. Now, a lot of people do argue with me saying, why don't I create it in the SQL database? Now, this is where the challenge occurs. So remember, as an analyst, you do not get access to the entire database, because the database is under the stewardship or under the control or under the you can say management of another very important role in the field of data called as a DBA, standing for database administrator, or a person known as a data engineer. Now, these are the people who control or have access to the database. And if you say that, okay, I want to create a calculation. Now, when you do want to create a calculation there, and if you want to modify it or you want to add something new, you are going to be at the mercy of these two people. No doubt, they are great and fantastic with their work, but believe me, they have a lot of tasks at their hand, and they will find it difficult for you to, they will find it difficult to keep updating and staying up to your expectations for updating this data. So it's always a no-no, a strict no-no to create your calculations in the source. Then you are left with data or calculations to be created within Power BI. Now, within Power BI itself, there are two very distinct components. I can say one is Power Query. That's where we are currently right now in our analysis part. And second is Power BI itself. Okay. Now remember, in Power Query, when you're working within Power Query, you're working with something called as the M language. Okay. And whenever you want to create a new column in Power Query, this is going to happen before load of data. And you can achieve the calculation or the creation of the column using something called as the custom column calculation. On the other hand, when you talk about Power BI, okay, Power BI uses the DAX engine, okay, wherein you write your calculations using DAX formulas. And this happens after you have loaded the data. Okay. Okay. Sami, I'm just reading your Sami. Power BI is completely new, and I'm finding it a little hard to understand this. Is it worth attending the workshop right now? Yes, Sami. Please stay here into the session. Do not leave the session, because you will finally at the end get to know and understand it, because when you actually recap it, you will understand it better. Okay, don't worry about that. Now, within Power BI, you are going to be creating calculations using two methods. One is using something called as a calculated column, and the other one is using a using a measure. Okay. Now, most of the times there's a very important question that says calculated column versus measures. When should you go for a calculated column? When should you go for a measure? When you should not use a calculated column, and when you should not use a measure. Okay. So this is something which is a very important point of contention. If we do get the time towards the end, I will discuss this as well, and I will explain to you the difference between the two and when and how you should be implementing or incorporating these calculations within your analysis. Okay. So with that said, I've given you a quick understanding of how calculations can be done. Let's move into understanding for now how to create the calculation in Power Query itself. So let me start off by going into the add column option. So I will go to the add column option here, and then I will create something called as a custom column. So when I click on a custom column option here, it says, what is the custom column that I want to create? So first and foremost, I need to provide the new column name that I'm going to be interested in. And then in this area, I will have to provide the formula that I'm going to be creating. And here I have a list of all the columns that I could use as part of my calculation. So let's begin with our creation of the first column called as revenue. So I'm going to write revenue, and I will write revenue with the name in brackets PQ. So I'm actually signaling that, okay, this is a column created in Power Query. So this is something that we need to understand. Now you go ahead and you look at the custom column formula. Now for this custom column formula that I'm going to create, I will go ahead and utilize the fields available at my disposal, or the columns available in my disposal. So here I'll start off by looking at the quantity. So I can click this quantity column and then click insert, and then I can put in a asterisk, which is for the multiplication symbol. And now when I'm actually at this point here, you can see it says token literal expected, and there's an error. The reason is because my formula is still not complete. So I need to put what is the second operand for this particular calculation. So the second operand for the calculation is the unit price. Now there are two ways of writing unit price. One is the same way that you can just select this and click insert, or you can double click and it gets inserted. The second thing is you start writing the name of the column. So unit, the moment you write unit, you can see unit price available on the first part of your drop down. Now this drop down that you see is known as IntelliSense. Okay. Now what we do here is we start typing unit. Okay, unit price. When you see unit price highlighted, you just hit the tab key to invoke that particular field as part of your calculation. Now remember, here we are using the square bracket, and then we are writing the name of the field or name of the column. Now this square bracket basically is called as the column access operator. The reason is because when you open the square bracket, you will be able to access the entire set of columns in that particular database, or that particular table, not database, but that table. Now, once you can see you have no syntax errors have been detected, you can go ahead and accept this particular custom column calculation. Now, please note that this basically does not mean that you have not made a human error. So be careful with the human errors that you end up making. If you have been asked to provide unit price, or you know that to get the revenue, I have to use the unit price, please do not end up using any other price or calculation or numerical based column. Otherwise, it will be a problem for you. So what we do here in this case is we go ahead and click on OK, and we see a new column being created for us called as revenue. Now, once you have the column created, you see there's a new step added called as added custom, and there's a setting icon, or basically a gear icon, that shows you that, okay, this can be changed. That means if I click on it, I can go ahead and change the formula if required. I'm not going to do anything of that sort. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and look at the revenue column. Now, when you look at the revenue column, you can see that this revenue column is picked up a confusing data type, like it says A, B, C, and 1, 2, 3. So there's no clear understanding of what the data type should ideally be. But we know that because it's numerical and we are going to be performing calculations on it, just like we created or we converted the data type for the unit price column, I'm going to do the same thing for the revenue column. So click this drop down and click on a fixed decimal number. So you can see now you've got this changed type 2 step that has been added. Okay. And revenue is now available with the dollar symbol. So that means that we are now ready to move ahead to the next table. So this table, I think we've sorted all the concerns with this table. Let's move to the products table. Now in the products table, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at the part number, description, product line, and product cost. Now in the product cost calculation here, the product cost column here, you can see again, this is a cost column, which is a decimal type. I'll just change it to a fixed decimal number to ensure that everything is perfect. And I'll say I want to add a new step rather than replacing the old step. I gave you a reason why we shouldn't be doing that. Okay. Now, in this case, when we talk about the part number, description, and product line, what we're going to do is we are now going to change the name over here by just calling it products by removing the suffix of 2 over there. And everything is now done. We are ready to load this data into Power BI. So let's go to the home tab and let's say close and apply. The moment you click close and apply, you will see that your data is now going to start loading into Power BI and you are going to enter the Power BI environment. Okay. So within the next 2 minutes, I'll quickly take you to the Power BI environment, considering the fact that many of you may have not attended the Power BI workshop. So let me give you a quick understanding of this. First and foremost, please note that when you are in Power BI, you do have this ribbon. Okay. You've got the different tabs available. And within the tabs, you've got the different command groups. Like for example, data. And then within that, you have different commands for the command group. Okay. On the left hand side here, you've got 4 buttons. These 4 buttons are for changing the view in your data. The first thing is to look at the report view. So whenever you create a visual here, you can see the visuals in this area. And if this is basically the canvas that you see, you can actually click on it and look at the report view. You can also click on table view to see the data or preview the data in this table view. Then you have something called as the model view. So when you go to the model view, you have your entire set of tables that you see. So unlike what you have seen in the case study which we discussed in the Power BI bootcamp, where you had only one single rectangle, here you've got 3 rectangles. And this is where you can see there's something called as a star schema that is being set up. So I'll explain you what the star schema actually is and why do we need to be worried about or understand, why do we need to really understand what the star schema is all about. So when we talk about the 3 buttons here, we also have another button called as the DAX query view. I'm not discussing that. That's more for advanced users. Now, since we are actually at the amateur level or at the beginner level, I would not want to get into this particular view. So let's go to the report view. In the report view, the first thing that you see is the canvas, which I've already explained. And then you've got the filters area. Okay. So let me just create a simple visual using the invoices tables revenue column. So when I click on the revenue checkbox, you can see there's a visual that's created which says rupees 972,000 odd value. Now this is actually supposed to be in dollars. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the column properties later on, not now. Let's talk about the filters. Now the moment I have a visual in the or on the canvas, you can see you've got a filters pane which allows you to filter at 3 levels. So the first level that you can filter on is at the visual level, which is at the the graph or maybe the chart that you've just created. That's the visual level. The second is at the page level. That means if I have multiple visuals here, you can actually see, you can add a filter and that will filter all the visuals that are there. Third is on all pages. Now, all pages basically means the report overall. That means here I've got page one. You can have multiple pages. So on every page, if I apply this report level filter, it will ensure that that particular data is not entered into the visual. That's what it is for you. So the filters pane is divided into three parts. One is the visual, then page, and then the all pages or the report level filter, right? Then you have got the different panes that are available on the right hand side. Now, because I have a particular setting activated, you can see you've got the build a visual pane. Basically, this allows you to select what visual you want to work with, or once you've created the visual, you want to change the visual, you can do that as well. And then you can see the fields that are already part of the visual. So basically right now I'm using a KPI card visual, which is a automatically created visual based on what what field I selected from the data pane, right? Because I've clicked on revenue, which is a numerical field, it has automatically created a KPI card visual for me. But that's something that depends on what you select. So because I have activated the on object interaction option, that's the reason you can see that I've got the KPI card visual activated, right? Now let's understand what we need to do with respect to the analysis. So here I also have the data pane, which shows you all the tables that have been loaded into the data set or the data model, right? So you can either call it as the data model, or you can also refer to it as the semantic model. Semantic model, right? Now, when we talk about the data model, we need to understand a few things with respect to this. So you've got the customers data, you've got the invoices data, you've got the products data, right? So you can actually expand and see the all the fields available in it, right? Now in the data pane, when I do click on any of the table, I will see the table tools, or if I click on the field or the column, I will see the column tools available. So using these tools, you can manipulate the properties of the table or the properties of the column if you need to do that from here. Okay. Now, moving ahead, you can see on the right hand side, you've got these buttons that allow you to switch between or toggle between the panes that you are dealing with. You can even click on this plus icon and add a different pane if you want. Okay, so if I click on this plus icon, you can see which is the pane you want to activate or add to your existing pane options here. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and look at the data pane. And before I do anything, I'll go to the view tab. In the view tab, you've got something called as the pane manager. Now in this pane manager, when you click this drop down, you've got something called as always show pane manager and show only one active pane. So if I click on this show only one active pane and I click on data, you can see only data pane is available. When I click on build, so what it does is it just is going to keep adding if I don't check this. But if I click on this and then I click on data pane, you can see only the data pane. If I click on build a visual pane, you can see only build a visual pane. So basically it's just replacing this for you. That's it. Okay. Now you are going to go ahead and learn. We're going to go ahead and learn how to work with the other views. So you can go to the table view. This gives you a quick view of your data. Please note it just gives you a preview of the data that's there, nothing beyond that. Okay, but there's one interesting thing. When you look at your table, you can see all your columns, and from here also you can change the properties. So I will change the properties from here. I'll go to the unit price column and I will click on dollar format for the unit price column. Similarly, I'll go to the revenue PQ column and I will change it to a dollar format here. So when I do that, I've got unit price and I've got revenue available for the dollar formatting. Same thing I'm going to do for my products table. So when I look at the products table, I look at the product cost and I will change it to a dollar format. So everything is now looking pretty good. We are now having all the data formatted and set up the way we want to set it up. So let's go to the model view. Now at the moment in the model view, we have these three tables available, and I'm going to explain this after I show you one very simple thing. So in this data model view, you can actually zoom out and see all your tables if you want to see. You can even go to the fit to page, which shows you all the tables at one go. This is the properties pane for you. So for example, let's say I select a table, you can see the properties of the table can be updated. If I select a particular field or basically a column, you can see the column properties can be updated. Okay, I will discuss this very soon and how it is to be used. Then there's a new tab here. This was not available in the older versions. I think they've done it in the fag end of 2024 update, where they have this model tab. This model tab basically tells you how many tables you have. So the entire semantic model story is given to you. So when you expand the semantic model, you can see calculation groups. You can see what is the format being used here in terms of the cultures, what culture format is being used. Then you've got what measures are created if we create any of them. Then what are the relationships? What is the the tables within the tables? Which columns are being used? And what is the hierarchies in each of the table? What are the partitions in each of the table, etc. Everything is going to be updated here. So we're not getting into the details of this, but this is how you can manage your data in the model tab of the data model view. Okay. Now let's go ahead and try to create a cross table visual. So I'm going to try to create a visual that allows me to break down this data. Obviously, when you start your analysis or you start your visual creation, you're basically firing up something called as the analytic query. I'm just going to quickly take you through the three important phases of the analytic query. I think we have enough time to explain this. So at the analytic query, you start off by filtering the data, then you classify or you group your data, and then you summarize your data. So you can either do these three steps, and you start like right now what we've done is we've started off by summarizing it. Now you can go from filtering to summarizing, or you can go from summarizing to filtering, whatever you are comfortable with. Now here what we do is we look at summarizing first. So we've summarized the data, and we can see we've got about $972,000. That is the sale for us. Now, when I want to group this by the state, what I do is I add the state column into the visual, and that will break down this $972,000 into the appropriate calculation. Okay. So let's just go ahead and see how that is to be done within our calculation. So I keep this visual selected, and then I choose to pick up, let's say, state column. Now, when I click on the state column here, what this does is it does not recognize that the state has to be utilized in the visual. Now, this is because we have not specified, okay, what should be done when I'm trying to use a field from this table and this table. So basically, we have to create, like as I mentioned in Excel, what you would do is you would use VLOOKUP and push the data into state, right? You would push the state column into invoices, and then you would deal with it, right? But in this case, we don't do that because we need to use something called as a relationships. So we need to tell Power BI that, okay, use a particular connection between the two tables and try to filter out how much is Alabama giving me in total, how much is Florida giving me in total, and blah, blah, blah. So how do we do that? Now to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my model view. Okay. Now in the model view, so there are multiple ways of creating the relationships. From the report view itself, you could go to the modeling tab and go to manage relationships, etc. Okay. I think we'll have to take a 2-minute break because the azan is going on. So I'm just going to take a 2-minute break. In the meantime, any queries that you have, please put it up on the screen. I mean, into the comment section. I will quickly analyze it. Okay. Yep. Uh, so thank you for waiting back. We need to respect the Ozan. So, anyways, right now what we do is we go ahead and we try to ensure that we get the next part where we try to create a relationship between the two the two tables, right? So to get the two tables together, to create a connection between the two tables, let's go to the model view. So you could even do it from the report view within the model tab. You can go to manage relationships, and from here you can just click on auto detect. So when you do that, it automatically detects and finds out two relationships that have been added to the semantic data model. You can click close and you can see the two relationships that have been created. And if you go back to your report view, you can see that the fields have been aligned properly, where you can see the revenue broken down by the state. But I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to go to the manage relationships. Now, if you look at the manage relationships and you actually look at the relationships right now, you can see that the relationships are built on the customer name column, which is what I do not want. Now, you would be wondering, why has it not been built on the account number, which is actually the common numeric code between the two tables? I'll give you a reason why that did not happen. When you use this auto detect feature, what it does is it looks for the common fields in between the two tables. If it finds the fields are with the common names in between the two tables, it uses it directly. If that is not the case, it looks for the structure of the data and finds out when there is a common data within the two tables, and it updates it. Right now it found customer name common and it updated it. So I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on these two and delete them, so that I do not have any relationships available in my table right now. And you can see it's not there. Now I'm going to go to the model view and I'm going to show you the easiest way of creating it. So you could go to manage relationships here as well, and you could click on new relationship, where you can see the new relationship window, and the relationships can be built based on this. So I can click the drop down, starting with uh, the master table, that is the customers table, and two table will be the invoices table. So here you can see again it has automatically picked up customer name. I could change it to account and customer account. Now the reason why it did not pick up automatically account number is because here it says account and here it says customer account. So this is one of the major reasons you need to be careful about when you're naming your columns, especially if you have control over your data. Please ensure that the name that you give your column is very, very clear and there's no problem with it. Anyways, now moving ahead, let's just cancel this for now and let's close it. And let me show you the easier way. Now, before I show you the easier way, you can see that the data has now been set up in a particular manner where I have the invoices table in the center. Okay, if it is not, you will do this in order to ensure that you see something called as a star schema. Now, before I move ahead, let me show you what a star schema actually looks like. So a star schema looks something like this, right? So you have in the center, you have your fact table. And around the fact table, you have all your dimension tables. Let me take it on a whiteboard, it will be easier for you to understand. So here in this case, I have only two tables. I've got a customer table and I've got a product table. Now using the common field between the two tables, I will create a connection or a relationship between the two tables. And that is going to enable me to filter the data into PowerBI, right? So this is why it's called as a star schema setup. So let's do it. So for the customers table, it's account number. So I select this column and I drag it onto the account number here. Once I do that, you can see you've got account number and account number here. Okay. Then we have got the cardinality section, where it's required for you to check whether there is a one-to-many cardinality. So remember, when you say from table and you say to table, you need to understand the concept of cardinality, right? So it's a one-to-many cardinality in this case. So one-to-many basically means that one customer appears only once in the customer table because it has to be unique. So this is where the primary key constraint or the primary key requires to be understood. Your primary key or your account column should have only unique values, one, and there should be no row in your data where the account number is blank. So it has to be not null. These are two major constraints. What are they? Constraints. These are two major constraints that should be part of your primary key column. So you should ensure that they are not null. That means it's not blank. And second, it is unique, because without that, you will not be able to create the relationship. So if I just say save, it's going to create a relationship, and you will see a link or a line running between the two of them. And you can see on this side, you've got one, and on this side, you've got the star, and you also have an arrow key indicating the arrow showing the one side to the many side. So the arrow runs from one side to many side. Now remember, this arrow basically is nothing but the cardinality. And cardinality means the direction, or you can say directionality of the relationship. That means this side will filter the, so one side will filter the many side. That's what it actually means. And that's how we are able to get the analysis done. And we are able to see that, okay, our revenue comes, the maximum comes from Georgia. Now, after this, it's the regular stuff that we normally do, where we create hierarchies and stuff. So let me go back and let's create the next relationship as well. So it's going to be the part number and the part number here. So we have the relationship. We'll just save this. And we are now ready to go back to our report view, and we can start building the dashboard that we want to build, right? So I'm going to go to the format tab, and I will activate the data labels here. So you can see that I've got the data label activated, and you can see here that about 0.44 million is coming in from Georgia. Now, obviously, these numbers are in million, and they don't really make a lot of sense because my total sales is less than a million. So I would want to see this in thousands. So I go to my data labels, let's expand it, scroll down, go to the value area, expand this as well, scroll down further, and instead of display units being auto, I will change it to thousands. So now I can see this in thousands over here. And also, maybe I would want to see the, size of the font a little bigger than what it is currently. So I can go to the format tab here, and I can look out for something called as font. I'm sorry. Okay, and then here I've got the font values, etc. So I'll just increase the font for the title a little. Maybe I'll make it about 16. Then for the Y values also, I'll increase the title a little so that the state names can be seen better. Let's make it about 14. Then I will update it for the x-axis values. Let's make it about 13 or 12. Okay, now if you have the data labels, you could do away with the x-axis values. So maybe we could just switch this off. So no x-axis values are being shown here. Now comes the data labels. Let's increase this a little better to about 14 so we can see this better. Okay, and I think that should solve the problem. Now please note the formatting differs for different visuals and different stuff. Okay, so very quickly, everyone, please let me know if you're enjoying the session. Give me a quick yes or no in the chat, and give me a quick thumbs up in the chat as well, right? Okay, so we have the first visual. Let's get the second visual where we try to understand what is the revenue coming in for different product categories or product line. So for that, I can go in my data tab, and please ensure that you've not clicked on the visual that you already have. You click on the white space here, and then you scroll down to get the total sales or revenue value, and you break this revenue down. So take this. Sorry. Okay, and this one can also be set up accordingly. Okay, so I will just get this broken down by the product line. So I have a product line column here, or product line. So this shows you that the product sales are the maximum, followed by consumables and then accessories over here. Okay. Now, when we are looking at maybe the sales coming in, we've got the revenue, and then we are now ready to move to the next level. We can easily do that by getting the profit and profit margin calculations. But before we actually do that, let's understand what is the concept of data properties and data hierarchy. So let me go to a new tab, new sheet here, and you will notice that when I actually created the state-wise revenue, it gave me a bar chart. Now, there are certain data types, or basically you can say not data types, but there are certain fields that need to have a proper category assigned to them. So what is the advantage of it? So let's begin with the simple part, where when I create the sales by state, I'm getting a bar chart. But what if I want it to be a map chart directly? So what I do is I go to the model view, and in the model view, I scroll down to the tables section, and within that, I open up the customers table, and then I can see that I've got the state column. So select the state column, and in the state column, you can scroll down, and we've got the advanced section here. So when I click on the advanced section, you've got something called as data category. You can click the drop down, and in this, you can choose the state column. So we have state or province. Let's select it, and you can see when I add the state column, you've got a icon which is more or less a globe icon that is for the state column. Now, once I've got this, the next thing I can do is I can go back to my report view, and in the page 2, I can select the revenue, and I can break the revenue down by the state, and look at what happens when I do that. Okay. Now, when I've done this, it has automatically given me a map, which is a bubble map, or you can say a symbol map that we are actually talking about, right? I could click this drop down, and I could choose any other type of map, maybe a filled map, okay? Or maybe I could have taken a simple shape map for myself, and then you could see over here that there's a color saturation here that's showing up a shape map. So you can see here, you can see Georgia has the maximum sales, okay? And if I go to the focus mode, you can see it better, and you can even interact with this one acting as a filter for the other visuals if you have them. Maybe I could just cut it and I could paste it here somewhere, and this will act as a filter as well for you, because if I click on, let's say, Georgia, the other visuals will get automatically updated accordingly. If I click on, let's say, North Carolina, or if I click on Florida, you can see these particular options getting updated accordingly, right? So this acts as a normal visual that you would have in Power BI, just like the normal interaction that you can actually perform. Okay, now moving to the next part, where we are going to create a hierarchy in the data. So why do we need a hierarchy, and what is the advantage? So let's say, for example, we now want to see within the product, what are the different product lines that are, what are the different products available under product line? So currently I only have product wise analysis. When I select product over here, it filters out the data for me, giving me the product sales for different states. Now what I want is, I want this interaction to be a little bit more detailed when it comes to the drill down option. Like for example, I want to see that within each product line, what is the product. So if I click on product part number, or I click on description, not part number, description, you can see that it just breaks it down and gives me the description for each of these. So if I go to the focus mode, you can see I'm able to see one line for each of the product within the product lines, which is something that's not really a great thing or a great piece of analysis for me. So what I want is, I want that, sorry, when I click on the product, so I'll just remove this for now. When I click on this product, it should drill down to the next level and give me the the product description analysis, right? So I will start off by going to the build a visual pane. And in this, currently, when I actually click on the product description and I go to the build a visual pane, you can see that it goes to the legend area. I don't want it to be the legend area. I want this to be in the y-axis area. So I drag my description and place it here into the y-axis. And you can see the moment I do that, you can see there are 3 new buttons available. One is the downward arrow, second is a double downward arrow, and third is your forked arrow, or you can say a forked, you know, what do you call it? A forked image, right? So these 3 are used for different purposes. Let me show you the purposes it is used for. So here in this case, if I click on this filters, it shows you what are the filters and slicers affecting this visual. There are no filters applied right now, so you can just leave that as it is. Let's look at this click to turn on drill down. Now, ideally, when I click on product, it filters the other visuals. But if I click on this button, click on drill down, and I click on product, it drills down to the product level. And you can see that dot matrix printer 11-inch high speed is the one that gives you the maximum sales of $333,000. Okay. And that is now broken down based on, so if I actually click on products, you can see these are the sales coming in for products alone. Okay, I can just go back up, and when you do that, you can see that actual sales of Georgia is $442.35, $35,000, right? $35,000. Sorry, $442.35,000. Okay. But when I click on product, it reduces the amount to 226.75 thousand USD. Okay, that's because I have filtered to the level of the product line. Okay, I can go back up, and then maybe I could even look at consumables, giving me the total value. Now, at the moment, it's giving me the value with the products individually within that particular product category. But when I click on the second button, let's go to the next. Let me just switch this off and click on the second button. When I click on the second button, if you see, I go to the focus mode to look at it better. It's giving me only the product description, nothing else. But I can go back up, and then I can click on the third button that says expand all down to one level. With this button clicked, I'm seeing everything in the next level of the hierarchy, not broken down by the heads. But here, when I click this, it breaks it down by the heads. So you can see the dot matrix printer is basically belonging to the product category. These are belonging to the consumables category, and so on and so forth. Let me just go to the more options section and click on sort axis. Now remember, by default, it is always sorting based on the revenue. But if I click on product line description, okay, it gives me the product wise analysis. So you can see product line, then the description, and you can see it is sorted in a descending order. I can change it to so I can click on sort axis and say ascending order. So you will see accessories right on top, then consumables, and then product. Okay, so this way you can analyze your data, but this hierarchy that is created is automatically created when I drag stuff into the appropriate area. But this is a temporary hierarchy. What it means is if I actually delete this, okay, and if I try to create the visual again by selecting my revenue and breaking down the revenue by the product line and then description, I'm going to go back to the same scenario. If I don't want to go back to the same scenario, I want to create a hierarchy that I can use permanently. What I would want to do is I would want to create one using the data model view. So I'll go to the data model view and let me just have a visual that gives me only revenue for now. Okay. So I will break down this visual based on the hierarchy later on. Now what I do is I go to the model view, and in the model view, I will expand my products table. And in the products table, what I will do is I will click on the highest level of the hierarchy. That is my product line. So with the product line on the right hand side, I'll click on this more options and click on create hierarchy. So when I click on create hierarchy, you can see a product line hierarchy appears for you. Now this hierarchy name can be changed by selecting the hierarchy, and you can click on something called as the name over here, and let's change this to product. Okay, just product, or we can say if I try to enter products, okay, it still picks it up because it's a products hierarchy. Okay, and then I will go ahead and scroll to the bottom in this properties pane, and from here I will select the drop down for, instead of product line alone being there, I will click the drop down and I will apply it as a, I will add one more level called as description. So when I add one more level, you can see we have product line and below that we have apply level changes, right? So apply level, till you don't click this, it's not going to be part of my hierarchy. Currently it says only product line. When I click apply level changes, you can see it's going to have product line and description both available for you, right? Now, when you do have products and you have product line and you have description available, what we need to do is we need to utilize this particular hierarchy for our analysis. So in order to utilize this as part of the analysis, what we do is we go back to our report view, and keeping this visual selected, which is my KPI card visual, I simply scroll to the bottom of products hierarchy and click on, I mean the products table, and I simply click on products. Now this hierarchy is now available in my analysis or in my visual. You can see it's part of the visual because you can see that in the data over here, products is already available. Now here I can treat it exactly the same way, the way I have shown you using these three buttons. But the advantage is if I delete this, okay, just for example, I delete this and I want to create it again, I simply select my revenue and then I click on the products hierarchy, and you can see that the breakdown is now available very easily with the appropriate drop downs available. So you have the option to drill down, you have the option to go to the next level in the hierarchy, you can even go to expand all down one level in the hierarchy, right? So this is where we are now going to go ahead and start the next part of our analysis. So we've looked at the entire modeling concept. So I've explained to you the important things in terms of modeling. Okay, I have explained to you how to create the hierarchies. I have explained to you how to go ahead and create the data categories, how to create or assign a data category so that we are able to analyze data better, okay, so that the report author is able to understand it better. I have explained to you how to work with the relationships. That was the first thing we did in the data model, right? Now the one thing that's pending is called as calculations. So I'm going to teach you now how to deal with calculations in Power BI. So when we talk about calculations within Power BI, we need to understand that calculations in Power BI are of two important types. One is calculated columns, and second is the measures. So let's create a calculated column called as revenue in this case, and I'm going to show you how the exact same column can be created in Power BI and how you can even create something called as a measure in this case, okay? So I start off by selecting the table name because that's where I'm going to create my calculated column. And once I've selected the table name, you can see that on top you've got the table tools option available. And here within that, you've got the calculations options available. So within this, you are going to select the new column option, okay? And in this new column, I am going to create a revenue, and in the bracket, I'm going to call it as CC because that indicates a calculated column, right? So let's begin by selecting new column. Now within the new column, when you create the new column, or when you click on new column, you will see you have column tools appearing on top. Now with this column tools appearing, you can assign whatever updates you want for this column. You can even create your column using the DAX calculation or a DAX function or maybe a simple DAX formula. So let's try and do that. So here I'm going to call the column name as revenue bracket CC, close the bracket, equal to. Now in this case, the formula that I'm going to write is going to be the unit price multiplied by the quantity. So let's start by writing unit price. The moment you start writing unit, you have written UNI, you will see that you have got the unit price column available. So I'll write unit to make it a little more easier for me to find out. You can see it's available, and this is basically where you can see this drop down, or this is happening because of something called as the IntelliSense. So IntelliSense basically gives you the ability to understand what is actually happening with respect to your data. So you see you have unit price. When I hit the tab key, you are able to invoke that particular field as part of your formula, right? And then you put a multiplication symbol, and then you write quantity. Now, once you've done that, you can hit enter, and you will be able to see the new revenue calculated column available in the invoices table. Now, let's just compare how does this work as compared to the column created in the Power Query. Now, please note, a column created in Power Query looks like a regular column without any symbol indicating that it's a column created in Power Query. Okay, you'll not be able to make out the difference. But when you look at a calculated column, you can make out the difference. And one is, you will see there's this icon that appears with this sigma symbol. Okay, another most important thing is when you click on it, you will see a formula bar appearing, which gives you the formula used to create that column. Okay, that's why this is called as a calculated column. Another important thing is when you go to the table view, you will see the calculated column appear in the table. If you can see here, you can see the revenue calculated column is there. So before I utilize it, let me go to this and change it to a dollar format. Now, once you change it to a dollar format, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to utilize this in our report view. So I go to the blank space, and let's see whether it gives us the same result or not. So I'm going to click on the revenue calculated column here, and you can see the amount is exactly the same that we are having with respect to the one that we created on the left hand side. And again, when I break it down by the state, you can see that I'm getting this value. I'll just change it to a bar chart to emulate exactly the same thing that we're looking at. Now, what I want is I want these properties of whatever I've made changes in terms of the font and everything to be applied to this. So let me try using the format painter, which is again something that we've been using for ages in Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. So if you select this format painter and you click on this, you can see that the formatting should have been applied, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to apply for the data labels, etc. I don't know what amount of formatting is going to be applied, or what kind of formatting is being applied across the visuals. So I'll have to do this manually, I believe. So let's just go ahead, and in fact I'll not want to do this manually. Let me show you a shortcut for this. I'll delete this. I will just select this, copy it, and paste it. And then what I do is, with this visual selected, when I have selected this visual, you will see what fields are being used. So you can see revenue PQ being used. I'll just uncheck it, and then I will check on revenue calculated column and convert this to a cluster bar chart. Okay, so this is where I can get the exact look and feel, because it takes a little bit of time to go to the format pane and make changes. So once you already have something available, you can just go ahead and update it very easily with respect to the formatting of the visual that you are working with. This is something that people struggle with a lot, so I just given you a trick to work with. Okay, so we've created a calculated column right now. So a calculated column is basically done or created after the data is loaded within Power BI. Okay, this is something that I wanted to explain to you, and you need to understand how this actually works. Now what we are going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to learn how to work with the next important concept, that is dealing with the measures. Now, a lot of times it does happen that we would want to reduce. In fact, ideally, there's a very important thing that you need to understand when it comes to dealing with calculations. Always avoid the calculations, or avoid creating a calculated column if you don't feel the actual the proper need for it. I'll give you an example, right? So just 1 minute. Okay. So what's happening is in the table here, we are getting an additional column, and this is increasing the model size. So we don't want that to happen. So what we do is we create a measure. A measure enables you to have the calculation in the model, but it does not increase the size of the data model. So let me give you an example for this. So here what I do is I go ahead and I look at my table, and within the table there's something called as a new column, and there's something called as a quick measure and new measure. Now in this case we cannot create a new a quick measure directly. The reason is because yeah, I think we can we really cannot create a quick measure here because we don't have two columns already ready for us. So let me show you what we need to do in this, because this is a more complicated scenario. Now the scenario here demands us to actually create a measure wherein we have to get the revenue calculation done. Now normally when you create a measure, it's a very simple thing that you multiply or you minus data from two columns, etc. So let's try creating a measure called as revenue, and in the bracket I'm going to write measure here, and I'm going to write equal to, and then I'm going to try to create the measure by multiplying the two columns. So the moment I try to write unit, you will see that it's not available in the drop down. Now please remember, it is not, this is not how it works. But what I want to do is I want to take the unit price and I want to multiply the unit price by the quantity and then get the measure created, right? So let's say I write sum, because I want to take the total anyways. So I write sum of the unit price, okay, multiplied by the quantity. That's also not working. So I close my bracket here, and then I multiply this by the sum of the quantity. Okay. When I try to do this and I hit enter, I'm going to get a measure. It's going to be created, but and also it's not going to be seen in the table. You cannot see the revenue measure created because it says revenue M. And most importantly, the revenue measure that you've created is with a calculator symbol. Now the problem here is when you see this with the calculator symbol, you are having a revenue measure created, but there's a small problem. I'll show you what it is. So let me go to the report view and let's try to create a visual with the new measure that we've created. So I'll just keep the white space selected and then I'll click on revenue measure. When I do that, you can see it says 1.28 billion, which is nowhere close to the value that we have. It's $972,000, and this is going into billions. That means there's something wrong. Now, what is the logic behind this and how has it been calculated? Let me explain it to you. So what has happened is it has taken the sum. Let's say you've got some numbers here, 100, 200, 300, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Okay. This is your rate or your unit price. And this is the quantity sold. Let's say 3, 4, 5, or 6, whatever, blah, blah. It has taken the total of this and taken the total of this and multiplied it. And that is one of the reasons why you see such an inflated value. And this is something you have to be very careful about. So the calculation logic that you build into your formulas is absolutely very important for you to understand. So how does it work? Now I'm going to delete this because this is to be completely changed. What I want to do is I actually want to create a calculation where I have to get the calculation in such a way that I'm able to access the unit price for every row and the quantity for every row. Okay, and I want to get the calculation done. Now, in case of a measure, okay, remember a measure. So if you're using, let's say, a sum function, the sum function or any function that you use has got a argument that you need to provide, or basically something that you need to provide so that it gives you an output. Now the sum function's argument is simple. It's a column name. That means, let's say I have a revenue column and I give a revenue column, it will give you the sum for you to calculate. That's not a problem. The problem arises when you want to have a calculation to be done first, and then you want the sum to be calculated. So basically here you want the unit price to be multiplied by the quantity, and you want to take the total for every single row, and then after the total for every single row is there, you maintain that in the memory, and finally you take a sum of it. So this is something like a sum product in Excel. If you don't know it, don't worry. A sum product is a very simple thing. What it does is it takes the value of the first array, the value of the second array, the first value of the first array, and the first value of the second array, and then it multiplies them. Like that, it keeps on multiplying throughout, and it stores this result for every single row inside the memory. And at the end, it takes a sum for you, because that's why it's called sum product. So first it takes the product, then it takes the sum. Okay, this is how it works. Let's go ahead and see how this is to be done. So here I start off by, first thing is deleting this measure. Okay, I can either delete it, or let me just remove this and replace it. So in this case, the question is, I cannot use sum, so what can I use? That is where we introduce ourselves to something called as the iterator functions, which is the sum x function. Now in the sum x function, what we do is we have to provide an expression, which is nothing but your formula, and you have to provide the table. So within the table, what is the expression you want to analyze? So let's do that. Let's go ahead, and here I write down sum x with the tab key. Now the table I'm going to use is the invoices table. So I write invoices, comma, and the expression is going to be unit price multiplied by the quantity. Close your bracket, press enter, and that's sorted. Now I have my revenue measure created. I can simply click on the white space and click on this, and you can see that this is now created correctly. I go to the revenue measure, and then in the measure tools, I change it to a dollar format. Once I've got all these calculations in place, the next thing is to build my dashboard properly. So let's quickly do it. Let's create a quick dashboard in the next 2 minutes, or a report in the next 2 minutes. So let's say I want to get some quick analysis or quick metrics to be analyzed. So what I do is I go ahead and start by creating a multi-row KPI card here, and I get my data. So let's say I pick up revenue measure, okay, and I pick up the quantity sold, two of the metrics that I want to analyze, right? And I increase the font size by going to the call out values, and let's just increase it to, let's say, 25. Okay, and here also for the category labels, I go to the value and increase it to 20. So this is what I get. Now let's create a quick map chart. Let's say I want to get a simple shape map, and within the shape map, I try to get my revenue. I am using the measure. Okay, I'm getting the revenue, and then I'm breaking it down by the state. Okay, and now I also want to see maybe a quick trend line for the month of sales. So that's where I create maybe a line chart, and in this line chart, I'm going to have the sales, again the revenue measure, and I'm going to break this down by the date month wise. So let's take the month wise sales. So you can see now a proper report is being constructed for me, and the good part is that all this acts more of like a slicer. And let's add a slicer also. Maybe I want to see a slicer added here, so I can scroll this down. I mean, I can move this down a little. And let's add a slicer here on top. So I'll select a slicer. Let's just increase this width. And in the slicer, let me add the product line. So let's add the product line here. Now I'm going to change the slicer a little. I'm going to go to the format tab, and in the title, in the slicer settings, I'll change it to a tile slicer. So this way, I've got my slicer, which I've got accessories. When I click on accessories, I get revenue and quantity sold for accessories. When I click on consumables, I get it for consumables, and here I get it for product. So one very important and last pro trick that I'm teaching you is extracting top n values for the data. Okay, so maybe I want to see a visual that gives me maybe the top values for the products, or maybe the top three values for the products. So let's say I take up a simple clustered bar chart over here, and I try to get the product description. So I go to the data, I'll pick up my revenue, okay, and then I will break it down by the description. I get all the descriptions, so don't worry. I'm going to apply a filter to this description by clicking the drop down. And instead of basic filtering, I will change it to top n filters with top three products by the revenue, and then click apply filter. Now the good part is when I click on accessories, I get the top three selling products for accessories, top three selling products for consumables, top three selling products for the product. And if I click on consumables, you can see consumables more or less has got a steady growth. If you look at accessories again, here there's a choppy growth here where the maximum sales is happening in the month of August. And if you look at product sales, again, the maximum sales is happening somewhere in May, but the others are not. So you would ideally want the consumables to keep rising, and that would be an indicative of the fact that your products are also selling well and they're doing well in the industry. Okay, so on that note, I would close the session for now. Thank you for being part of this particular boot camp, and I hope and wish you all the best in your careers. Do stay with us and stay tuned to the various boot camps that we normally work with. Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, the backend team, Anam and team. Thank you for the support, and wishing all of you all the best. Good night and goodbye. Thank you.